Hi guys, it's Jack with Talking Ball, and today we are looking at Miami basketball ahead of the 2024-25 season, and it's going to be the 14th season under Coach Jim Larrañaga. And last season was a big disappointment. I mean, they finished 15-17, 6-14 in the ACC, which was second to last. They ended the season on a 10-game losing streak. And listen, it was a big disappointment. They came off a year where they made a Final Four run. They had a great team. They were there was a number of injuries. Guys didn't seem to buy into their roles. There's just a lack of consistency throughout the year for Miami. And then ultimately, like I said, the injuries kind of piled up, and this team just wasn't healthy. And it wasn't a very deep team either, so it couldn't withstand that. But most college teams aren't. And so it makes sense that they struggled as the year went on. And so this year, hoping to regroup and try to improve as Miami tries to get back on track under Coach Larrañaga, who's done a great job at this program. And look, this is a college basketball channel, but also a Duke basketball focus. And so as we get closer to the season, I'm going to focus on some of these ACC teams. And as a Duke fan, Miami is one of two schools I have a ton of respect for. The other one being Florida State, just based off their coaches, their programs, what they've been able to do on a consistent basis and winning more with less talent overall. And so with that being said, I think now is a good time to go into some of these roster changes, and then we'll get into my projected rotation and my predictions for Miami for this season. So who's gone, who's back, and who's new with Miami basketball? Well, who's gone? There's a ton of roster turnover here with this team. And notably, guys like Norchad Omier, Wooga Poplar, and Keyshawn George are all gone. The first two transferred to Baylor and Villanova, respectively. And then Keyshawn George, I felt like, as a draft analyst, I liked him. I felt like he was pushed a little bit into the 2024 class when he could have used another year in college. But because the draft class was so weak, it made a ton of sense for him to exit now, and he ended up being a top 20 pick, or top 20-ish pick, I should say, for the Washington Wizards. Then Bensley Joseph also transferred out to Providence, and he's the last of, I would say, the key rotation players. Then you had four guys who also were like on the fringes, but one was a little bit more important than the others, in my opinion. So you have Christian Watson, Michael Nwoko, AJ Casey, and Ja'Kai Robinson, who all transferred out. And Welko was the guy to me that felt like the biggest loss, because in spot minutes or in the games that Omier didn't play, I thought Welko was kind of showing some flashes of a guy who next season, could take over as a starting center for Miami. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen. So who's back? Well, surprising to me, Nigel Pack is back. I thought he was out of eligibility, but what do I know? Matthew Cleveland is also back for his second year with Miami after coming over from Florida State. If he can stay healthy, I think he's a good player. And Paul Jobay is back. And he's a guy who's similar to Nwoko. I saw some flashes with, but not quite to the same level as Nwoko. I'm curious, Miami fans, do you guys think Jobay is a guy who can break out this year? Because I think he's kind of like on the fringe for a guy who could break out, but I'm not sold as somebody who didn't watch all of the Miami games, right? So who's new for Miami basketball? Well, they've got a lot of freshmen coming in and even more transfers. So the key freshman is Jalil Bethea. Top 10 recruit, number 7 on 24/7 Sports, combo guard, about 6'4". And I think this freshman class is very legit. So for him to be in the top 10, I expect him to have a great year for Miami. Austin Swartz, Isaiah Johnson, Arugu, and Davina Uguchekwu are all coming in. Swartz is a top 100 recruit. I think he could crack the rotation or just be outside of it. And the other two I don't expect to play very much. Now, transfers. This is where it gets very interesting as far as I'm concerned for Miami. AJ Staten-McRae from Sanford, Yusuf Basa-Ama from Yale, Kyrie Hui from Idaho State, Jalen Blackman from Stetson, Brandon Johnson transferred over I believe from East Carolina, and Lynn Kidd from Virginia Tech. So Jalen Blackman, he's a legit scorer. Yusuf Basaama, he's from Yale. He's a practice guy. But Blackman, Brandon Johnson, Kyrie Hui, and AJ Staten-McRae and Lynn Kidd, I expect to all be part of the rotation. And now I'm going to get into how I see that kind of unfolding, because there's a lot of pieces to replace, but I think some things are a little bit clear as far as who the starting lineup is going to be for Miami. So I think their starting five shakes out like this: Nigel Pack, Jalil Bethea, Matthew Cleveland, Brandon Johnson, who listen, I'm just looking at the stats, but he had some pretty impressive numbers, could shoot the three, could rebound, had some good steal numbers, so I think he's a good guy to have at the 4 spot. And then Lynn Kidd is your 5. I watched Lynn Kidd a couple of times. I know he can score as a big man, but defensively, he left a lot to be desired as far as I was concerned, so I'm not too impressed by him. But off the bench, Jalen Blackman was a guy who scored 20-plus points per game and shot near 40% from 3 on 8 attempts. So that's an impressive scorer to be coming off of your bench, along with Kyrie Hui, who I could be butchering his last name. I apologize. But he did average over 1 block per game. He's 6'9". I think he's your backup 5 and could even end up being your starting 5, depending on if Coach Larinaga wants a little bit more defense in his starting lineup. And then Paul Jobay and AJ Staten-McRae round out the rotation. I think Austin Swartz is just outside. But again, haven't seen him play, so he could easily be in the rotation. And that's something we'll have to watch, as we get into the season for Miami. Now, overall, I think it's a really solid starting 5, and I think they're 6 or 7 deep. And we'll have to see how Paul Jobay does, and that could make them 8 deep. I think this is a team that on paper should be able to rebound this season. And that continues as we look at the schedule here for Miami, because Larinaga, I think intelligently to get this team some momentum, although it could come back to bite them at the end of the season depending on how things shake out. The non-conference schedule for Miami this year is not the most challenging. They play in a Charleston Classic. These are their notable games. I didn't write down every low, major, or mid-major opponent. These are the notable games that I have. So they're in the Charleston Classic, where they'll take on Drake, the winner of Oklahoma State and FAU, and then the winner, or potentially Villanova, Seton Hall, VCU, or Nevada in the last game. And so you could get 1 or 2 quality matchups. There's no one outstanding. No one's terrible here. And then the ACC SEC Challenge, they'll take on Arkansas at home. And that was all I saw in terms of notable games. I could have missed one, so if I missed anything, let me know in the comments below. But that's what I have right now for Miami. Now in conference play, they'll have Florida State, Duke, and Virginia Tech as their home and away opponents. And then at home, they'll have Clemson, NC State, Notre Dame, SMU, Syracuse, Virginia, and Wake Forest. And then on the road, Boston College, Cal, Georgia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Stanford. So, with all that being said, how do I see this season shaking out for Miami? Well, if they can stay healthier, which I think they should. Last year was pretty unlucky. And I think they have some depth. Like I mentioned, I think their non-conference schedule is a little bit light. So I think they can get off to a good start. So I got them going 9-2 in non-conference. And honestly, that could be a little bit conservative with a head coach like Larinaga. And they have a lot of new pieces, but they're experienced players. So I think they could gel maybe a little bit quicker than other teams. So 9-2 non-conference. I have them going 13-7 in conference play, which gets them to 22-9. And what I was alluding to earlier as far as the non-conference schedule could come back to bite them, the ACC has not gotten a lot of respect in the net ratings and when they're doing the brackets for March Madness, when they're seeding teams. And so while 22-9 would certainly get you in, if they end up closer to, let's say, 20-11 with a light non-conference schedule, not a ton of opportunities for high-quality wins in conference play outside of Duke and North Carolina, they'll be firmly on the bubble is what I'm getting at. If they're not 22-9, 23-8, you get what I'm saying. So I'm curious though, guys, what do you think about Miami heading into the season? How do you see it faring for them? Will they bounce back? Will it be another down year for Coach Larrañaga? Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. It helps us grow. And I'll see you next time. Peace.